Welcome to Inside Voice, your behind the scenes take on the $150 billion home care industry. Here, it's not about the loudest voices or polished headlines. It's about real stories, real challenges, and real insights from those shaping care every day. Join us as we cut through the noise, explore trends, and uncover what it truly takes to make a difference in the lives of those we care about. Inside Voice. Today, I'm with Ashly Sam Luckose, who got his Juris Doctorate from the University of Miami, an undergrad at Georgia. He was added to the team at Preferred Care at Home as their general counsel back in 2014. He's our go-to person in the organization for all things legal, and I'm super pumped to have him today on the podcast in the Inside Voice. Ashly, thanks for being here.
Wonderful to be here. Excited.
Yeah. So one of the things I think is a really good place to start for a lot of people, they may find themselves is understanding home care, right? So it's for many families and even some of our owners who decide to go into this business, home care is a very complex industry. And for a lot of people, they get thrown into the deep end. And it's like drinking out of a fire hydrant where we actually fit in and the services we provide. And so if we could just clarify, what is home care and the natural sense of what we provide at Preferred Care at Home?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. Like you said, oftentimes people get all these like terminology confused. But at the most highest level, home care is non-medical support provided in someone's home. It's about helping people live safely and independently.
Yeah. And so for a lot of individuals, like home care would look like what to them? Like what are the services that we can provide to keep someone safe in their home?
Yeah, great question. And this really, it makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because what are the things that you are used to doing on your own, in your own home, right? The things that allow you to live independently, that if any of those things became things that you couldn't do, people would notice and they'd be worried about you, right? So, a lot of what we call activities of daily living, bathing, grooming, toileting, all these things that we take for granted as, people who are, fully capable of living on their own. When any of those things get removed from the equation, the quality of life just plummets, right? So that's why home care is so important, because that's what our focus is, to allow you to continue to do that as long as we can help you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things is I always like to describe home care as if you were to think of somebody completely dependent. What are the activities and services that they're going to need to get done in order to function at a quality level, right? Because one of our missions at Preferred Care at Home is to improve the quality of life, right? So it's not just we're going to come in there so you can breathe and live, but to improve that quality of life. And so think of a senior who's just in their bed in total need of assistance. What are the first things that we're going to need to get done? Well, the first thing is they're going to need to get out of bed, right? So we're talking about transfer. Then they're going to need to, when you get out of bed, what's the first thing you do? You go to the bathroom, toileting. Now it's time to take a shower, bathing, right? Now it's time to get dressed, dressing. Let's comb the hair, let's brush the teeth, hygiene assistance. Now let's walk into the kitchen, ambulation. And then we got feeding, let's prepare a meal, let's help them with feeding, medication reminders. And now we get more into what we call instrumental activities, not as hands-on, but equally as important. Meal preparation, medication reminders, companionship, transportation to and from doctor's appointments, or to continue the things that they love, right? Because when we hear home care, it's like, okay, well, this is it. The good years are behind me. But not with Preferred Care at Home. Our mission is to, again, come alongside them and improve that quality of life. So you like your movie matinees, let's do those things again. And so home care for a lot of individuals is mom is no longer able to be at home alone safely, and I don't have peace of mind. Yeah. You hire a company like Preferred Care at Home with all of those services to make sure that home remains a safe option for mom.
Exactly.
So let's talk about this. Medicare and home health.
Yeah.
So we got, and in a state like Florida, it's you're a home health agency and you do private, and then you're a home health agency and you do skilled and and you get reimbursed by Medicare. So let's describe some of the differences, and what is the difference between home health and private, what we do?
Yeah, wonderful. And I would love for us and other people like us or in our space to talk more about this, because there's so much confusion about it. But I've heard this somewhere, and I thought this is a great way of kind of helping people start to understand it. I've heard that people say home health treats the condition, home care supports the person, right? So, and that kind of goes along the line of other things I've heard you say a lot, which is, when you think of home health and Medicare and all these things, it's very short term, right? It's episodic. It's, designed to treat, stabilize, or rehab. Whereas what we do and all the services that you had spoke about earlier is ongoing. Right. So it's we're going to help provide it for as long as you need it.
Yeah. And in a broad term, I think it'd be helpful for the listeners to understand when you say the word Medicare, right? Home health covered by Medicare falls under one of those services that they offer. So Medicare has 4 parts to it. It's Part A, Part B, Part C, and Part D. Right. It's a big umbrella term, which Ashly, I think that's amazing. Could you say it again? It treats the what?
Right. So home health, this short-term thing, it treats the condition, right? So
condition.
Whatever whereas like what we provide and again, we'll get into this a little bit later. It's not that we're not in the more skilled world, because we are, but if we're talking most of what we do and the primary thrust, yes. The more supporting the individual continue what they've already been doing.
That's so good, and that's exactly right. So there's A, B, C, and D, a part of Medicare, and like a lot of families will go, well, does Medicare cover this? Talking about our services, and they get confused because they hear this term home health, and there's a big difference in what they provide and what we provide. And again, Medicare's job is very simple, is to address the acute, which means short term. Address the acute need. So where I want your mind to go is, where does Medicare play a role? Medicare will play a role is when something has happened and there is a need for skilled acute services to get this individual who's over 65 back to where they were before they ended up in this continuum, or back to what they call a new normal looks like. And so Part A is major medical. Right? So you're thinking hospitals, think skilled nursing facilities. And my question to you, Ashly, which is rhetorical, are you ever supposed to live at a hospital?
No.
No, exactly. And that's the idea of Medicare. It's not a long-term support. So the job is to see what's going on, find out the need, the issue, create a solution to that, and then move it on to the next continuum, so to speak, right? And that continuum most of the time would be something called a rehabilitation center, where you have 20 days, if you stayed 3 nights in a hospital, 20 days covered by Medicare for rehabilitation. And so their job is to continue the rehab. Now, rehabilitation, does that sound like something that's supposed to be long-term? The answer again is no. It's to get you back to a new normal. Actually, fun fact, Medicare can't continue to pay the providers if progression has stopped. So again, that's why I said the term new normal, because once progression ends, Medicare can't continue to reimburse a provider. It's considered Medicare fraud. And so what happens is you have an individual like Nancy who's been completely independent. She's fallen, broken her hip, gone to the hospital, got surgery. Now she's at rehabilitation. And now there's a new normal. That new normal doesn't look like being able to remain at home alone. And that's where we come in, and we provide in Medicare's absence. So kind of continue that, what I talked about so far with the hospitals and skilled nursing, that's Medicare Part A. Part B would be the home health, right? So they're coming into the home, and they're doing PT and OT. And if there's PT and OT in the home, they may do bathing and dressing. But what I want your mind to understand where to go is, just like a hospital, you're never supposed to live there, and that's long-term. Just like skilled nursing, you're never supposed to live there in long-term. It's the same thing with home health. Actually, a doctor needs to write that order in order for home health to be in the place, and they have to see a need and progression happening with home health. Once that stops, you're not getting another order written. And so a lot of the times when home health is in there, we're all also in there. And so I kind of want to clarify, what is home health? What is home care? What's the difference? Why doesn't Medicare cover what you do? Well, Medicare covers home health, but the area in which Medicare covers home health is that skilled side where they're sending out a therapist or occupational therapist for 1 hour a day, maybe 3 times a week, for about 3 weeks. Once that order is done, you have to get that renewed by a doctor. The likelihood of that happening is very small because that's considered Medicare fraud if you continue to write orders where there's no longer a need. And so there's this major gap in the services that a senior needs from the continuum of Medicare, and that's where we come in and fill in those gaps of home care. Just continuing on briefly for the listener, because I mentioned it, Part C of Medicare is what we consider Advantage plans. So just because you turn 65 doesn't mean you stop caring about yourself, your teeth, your vision, your hearing. These are add-ons. And actually a part of one of those Advantage plans would be a service like home care, which we could talk about here a little bit later. Yeah. And then the last D, Medicare Part D, I want your mind to go to drugs. That's pharmaceuticals. And so that's the 4 parts of Medicare. And what I want you to understand is Medicare does not reimburse home care agencies in the non-medical field. It's not chronic. It's only acute and short term. And so I think that is helpful. Would you like to add anything to that, Ashly?
Yeah, no, exactly as you put it. The only thing I would say is, and I know we're probably gonna circle back to it, but with Medicare Advantage, they're trying to address some of those issues with traditional Medicare, and kind of include services like ours, like in the non-medical world, as an option. But that's something that you would need to opt into. And when you opt into Part C, you're opting out of traditional Medicare. So there's pros and cons of both. But one of the pros of Medicare Advantage is that it focuses more on preventable type, conditions and things like that. And that's what home care is great at, right? Reducing admission and all those things. So there is some sort of benefit, but like you said, when people are talking Medicare, they're usually talking about traditional Medicare, and that is really not something that,
Yeah, it's great. I always like to describe a Medicare Part C Advantage plans like going through a cafeteria line, right? And you have all of these items, right? Vision, yeah, I want that. I'll put that on my plate. Dental, yeah, I want that. I'll put that on my plate. Hearing, yeah, I need that. Then there's one item, call it the scrambled eggs, which is long-term supportive care or services, right? Long-term supportive services, which reimburses agencies like ours for care. Now that would look like, 20 visits for 4 hours for a calendar year. So once you use those 20 visits, it's gone. And so you put that on, and then at the end it's weighed. And the different items makes your premium go up. And so seniors go, okay, well, that's pretty heavy, those scrambled eggs. I don't want that. And so it's not everyone on Medicare Advantage has that service, but some do, and we can tap into that. But again, like you said, it's short. We're talking a limited number of visits, short hours. It's not really where, if there's a huge need to make sure Nancy stays at home safely, Medicare Advantage isn't going to be able to fill that need. It's supplemental. That's a really good way of putting it. Let's talk about transition here. Let's talk a little bit more about licensing. Okay, so some states have licenses, which means you have to get a license from the state to be able to provide personal care into the home, like what we do. Other states don't. Why does that matter? What should families look for? And what should we be able to educate our community on licensing in home care?
Yeah, and it's kind of how would you want to think about it as someone who's interested in getting care and want to know about licensing and things like that. States that are, we'll say that most states are licensed at this point. Some states aren't. Some states that you would expect to be licensed, like Massachusetts, still aren't, even though they may be heading towards that path with some of the recent law developments. But licensing allows consumers to expect certain things, right? It's the expectation, right? There's standards, there's guidelines, there's scope of care. There's like what you can do, can't do, all those things, which is great.
The personnel that can provide the care.
Exactly. And there's, almost a sort of supervision by the state. The state will check, be it during renewals or when you're initially getting a license, or if there's an issue and it triggers some sort of investigation, the state is then allowed to come in and make sure that you're sticking with the responsibilities that is expected of you, right? So there's almost like a consequence to things. But the thing is, if you're in a state that's not licensed, like right now, let's say like Alabama or something like that, that doesn't mean it's the Wild Wild West over there, because there's still regulation that happens just more in a more like down the stream way, right? So say something bad happens because this agency that's not licensed, hired someone they shouldn't have hired, right? And then something bad happens. Well, that consumer who experienced this bad thing is allowed to sue, right? So there is, negligent hiring. There's common law principles that they could use to make sure that people are still sticking with what they stick with. But you don't want to live in that world. So one of the things, listen, we'll toot our own horn when we need to, but we have standards regardless of licensing, and oftentimes our standards are higher than what the state licenses are, right? So if a preferred care home franchise owner is not meeting certain standards, they're going to have to ship up or ship out, right? Is how you could say it. So we take those things very seriously, but yeah, we have standards, and those standards oftentimes are in line with most state licensing. So
and ours truthfully go above and beyond those standards. Yeah. So let's talk about what is more common, a licensed state or an unlicensed state? Because if I'm a consumer and I'm listening to this, I would want to make sure that I live in a licensed state, that there's a certain level of standard in place so that I can ensure that my mom's being taken care of properly. Obviously, you don't want to go down the list and list all the ones, but what's more common? And if you have like a percentage on licensed versus unlicensed, if you give that.
Oh, yeah. I would say at this point, we're headed towards like almost like 70 to 80% licensed. So a lot of states are getting licensed. And this is more so like a recent development. Over the years, we've seen states that had no licensing for decades and decades, all of a sudden start that process of getting it. So just even in the decade I've been with the company, we've seen California become a licensed state. We've seen Ohio become a licensed state. And again, like I mentioned earlier, Massachusetts is taking steps to head towards that sort of.
And for us, the entrepreneur side is like, okay, it's another barrier. It's another licensing fee. It's another thing that I got to do on a monthly or yearly basis. For us, we actually like it, because what it does is first of all, licensing for preferred care at home is never an issue because of our standards and because of having, frankly, Ashly on the team. But second is it does weed out the lower level competitions that might, in some instances, take some of your potential clients, right, and care team. So for us, licensed states, we actually enjoy. Wouldn't you say that?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's a barrier of entry. I believe you mentioned earlier, right? And that in a lot of ways, cuts out the riffraff, so that we think it's great.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked a little bit about Medicare earlier, but just in a broad sense, the most common questions that, as an owner-operator of a location, I receive would be, can Medicare just pay for this? Like, why doesn't Medicare pay for this? So what would be, in a nutshell, one of the ways you could answer that question? Does Medicare pay for this? Because it's never just a simple no.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, and this is, you got to go back to when the lawmakers passed, Medicare and all that, which is a great program, but it wasn't designed for long-term care. It wasn't, so that was never the intention. So we can't really force it to do it now. We may want it, but it's not the case, So the reality is, it just isn't the proper tool for this issue.
But yeah, and the answer to that question would be, well, maybe. What type of services are you looking for? Because if you're looking for someone to be with mom, 4 hours in the morning or 12 hours during the day or 7 hours when you're at work, and help her with the bathing, dressing, preparing a meal, making sure she takes her medication. No, the answer is no. Medicare doesn't cover this. But if you're looking for potentially some PT or OT in the home, that is something that Medicare could come in and assist with. But let's kind of pivot here, because I think it goes to a broader question that is important for us to tackle is, payment diversification sources for families and agencies alike. So, Medicare, and we talked about C, and we'll probably bring that up again, in a broad sense, no, doesn't pay for our type of services. But what are some payment diversification sources and offsets that maybe families could tap into, or even preferred care home owners could look at as ways to open up their streams of revenue? So like what comes to mind to me would be, well, I'll let you kind of walk through some of the ones that come to your mind first.
Yeah, some common ones that we bring up to potential clients who are looking for care is Medicaid if they're eligible for it, and or VA, Veterans Affairs. There's avenues you can go down there as well, depending on whether you're a veteran. Medicaid, obviously, that's it's the financial. There's a financial calculation that happens there to see if you are eligible for it. But those are conversations we would have to figure out whether those are some options for you. But long-term care insurance, that's another very common one. That some people may not even be aware that how useful it could be, right? To cover some of these expenses. So there's a lot of things that we would ask you to find out what your options are, right? And then obviously this is all on top of private pay.
Right. Yeah, I think that's so good to talk about Medicaid because for a lot of individuals, people say Medicare, Medicaid, like they're interchangeable. They're not interchangeable at all. They're completely different. Where I want you to think is Medicaid, aid, think financial aid. There's a requirement that you have to have in order to be able to be put on Medicaid, which means you are financially limited. Once you become financially limited, yes, the doors do become opened to different services that you do not get if you do not qualify for Medicaid. Those things come out of your pocket. But once you are on Medicaid, the government or the state will be able to reimburse agencies like ours for care. So we're talking Medicaid, not Medicare. Aid, Medicaid. So I think that's really important. And so let's talk a little bit about Medicaid here because I do think there's a large portion of individuals who may find themselves on Medicaid, or if their mother or father on Medicaid, or even agencies that think, is this a good route for me to go on payment diversification? Is there a need, an avenue to be able to service individuals like this? What can you tell us if you know about Medicaid?
Yeah, so the tricky thing about this is, and the tricky thing about this question in general is, unlike Medicare, Medicaid, like you mentioned, state-based. So every state is different about what sort of programs are able to participate, or like what sort of programs are able to do home care, for instance. But there's a ton. Usually with Medicaid, there's a ton of home and community-based waivers programs under Medicaid that the state uses to address needs like home care. So that is somewhat common in our space, that Medicaid. Much more so than obviously Medicare.
Yeah, absolutely. So state to state dependent. Frankly speaking, there's certain states that are fantastic to be operating the home and community-based waiver program in, because the reimbursement rate is high. And for you looking for a provider, that's good news, because that means you have strong providers like Preferred Care at Home in that market being able to take that waiver and send out our highly vetted, qualified, insured workers' comp caregivers. For agencies that the reimbursement states that the reimbursement rate is low, we're not in, because there's just no margins, there's no opportunity for that. So that is state by state based. And then essentially, just to create some clarity too for listeners and even providers, it's not like for most states, it's not like I can wake up one day and sign up with the Medicaid and then start receiving referrals. It's a waiver program that there's most of the time managed care organizations that are receiving those funds. So we're talking private organizations that are receiving the government funds, because they're like, listen, this is a lot of work. We don't really want to deal with it. So we'll give you the money. You could probably take a little piece of that because you're managing it. And then you guys onboard their providers and hand it out and deal with the referrals, right? And so we call those MCOs, managed care organization. So you get Medicaid certified, and then you sign up with the MCO. So there's a two-step process that a lot of people get confused on, frankly. And then there's the relation development part of it. So I think that's helpful for maybe families to also understand is looking into your local MCOs and contacting them directly could help you skip some of those pain points. And even if you're preferred care at home location, trying to think out what do these steps look like that hopefully provide some clarity. Okay. So I do want to go back. We talked about Medicaid, I think, in good depth. What are some other options? We brought up long-term care insurance. What is long-term care insurance? Yeah,
it's a almost like a private solution to this issue, right? Because like I said earlier, when people are the lawmakers, the smartest people in the country, when they were designing these systems, they had an intent and a purpose to what they were trying to do. And this like long-term sort of care wasn't meant to be handled by Medicare, right? So in its space, this was these sorts of policies, and these are private insurance policies that were able to be purchased. It's one of those things where we've noticed as providers, we know as providers that, the older iterations of the LTC policies were far more benevolent, far more expansive in terms of like how much can go towards certain, care costs and things like that. The ones that are more recent, not as friendly, because one of the reasons why is because they were so popular. They were popular and they were effective, and we've had people aging into being able to use these policies, and it's always nice to come across a client because we can help them, and they don't have to spend anything out of pocket really because their policies are so wonderful, right? But that's one thing that we would still encourage if possible for people to get these sorts of long-term care policies. Think long-term. So if you're too young to really care about these things or worry about these things, it's still really a good idea to look into this and maybe get it, because they're willing to give you these sorts of policies when you're young and healthy, right? It's when you get older is when these things no longer are available to you. Mm-hmm.
I think the best way to think about it too is like a life insurance policy. It's a cash policy that you've been paying into for a really, really long time for a situation like this. I think the statistics of recently is if you're over the age of 65, there is a 75% chance that you will need some type of in-home support or some type of care support. So the numbers are overwhelming that a long-term care insurance policy is extremely advantageous. So advantageous that, like Ashly has said, the policies that we saw back in the day are a lot more friendly than some of the ones that we are today. And what does that look like? Because no policy is the same. And just to create some clarity and color in the picture a little bit, a policy would look like a cash benefit, like a $250,000, let's say, a pool, and then they would pay a provider like us, let's say $150 a day to be able to provide the services. So we get a $150 allowance a day and a pool benefit, and so that's what we're able to work with. But no policy is the same. You could have 300, 400, 500, unlimited pool amount. It just depends on the policy. And so, long-term care insurance is something that is extremely beneficial for our industry and that you should be looking into. And I would say it makes up roughly 20% of all of our clients would be long-term care insurance. So let's talk about VA. What is VA and what does that look like? And I know that there's actually two forms of VA benefits that preferred care at home locations find themselves tapping into. Could you talk to me about those?
Yeah, so VA, Veterans Affairs, it's kind of healthcare programs designed for our veterans, deserving veterans. One really common one is aid and attendance. It's a sort of supplement stipend sort of thing that people who, if they are eligible, and eligibility can be a little bit tricky, and we have to verify whether the individual is eligible for it. There's some like active duty type requirements, but if they meet all those requirements, they were able to supplement their payment for care, and that's different from the more expansive sort of care program, like with the Community Care Network, CCN, and that also kind of works in a similar way to what you were how you were describing Medicare, Medicaid waivers and Medicare Advantage. It's a public-private partnership in a way. So you may have like an insurance provider kind of administrating it and handling it and processing these things. So as a provider, you would need to get onboarded with whatever group is in charge of your region. And once you're onboarded with them, you'd have access to these referrals and things like that.
What we were talking about was just strictly the veterans benefit that they receive.
Yeah.
The waiver benefit, kind of like the Medicaid waiver, would be aid in attendance. And that's like a cash benefit that comes to us as a provider. There's 5 criteria that a veteran needs to meet. One of those is financial limitations, like we discussed. The other one would be honorable discharge, at least 90 days of service, 1 day during active wartime, and a need. Like you have to be over 65 and have a need. But if those 5 criteria are met, and we're talking, I think the threshold is like 166,000, excluding your home and your car. So if you don't have stocks, bonds, savings lower than that, you qualify for aided attendance, which is a cash benefit that comes to us as a provider for us to be able to provide care to you. An amazing resource for veterans who are on limited resources. And again, it's not one or the other. You can tap into both. So if you have resources as a veteran, you can still tap into the VA benefits for home care. And then if you're lower income as a veteran and are lower than that 166 threshold in savings and stocks and bonds, there is aid and attendance, and you can do both. And for us as a provider, we can tap into both as payment diversification. Okay, let's talk about private pay. What are some of the ways that we're seeing families come in for individuals that kind of fall in between that baseline of, hey, I need care, I don't have a ton of resources available to me, but this is necessary? What are some of the ways we're seeing families navigate that?
Yeah, oftentimes, they hear from a friend, they're like, hey, so-and-so needed care, and they were able to hire someone off of wherever. I mean, I don't know if Craigslist is still a thing, but like similar sorts of, places. And, it sounds sensible in some ways. You're like, okay, what is the cost? Are these people, do they have experience? I'm sure you would ask, and they would submit a resume, you review it, and you say, okay, well, all right, you're hired. Come on board. And, to someone who is unfamiliar with the nuances, that may seem like a good option to take. But you and I, we're in this world, and we know that's not necessarily the case, because there's so many different moving parts that you need to be aware of, or you're walking into like a huge mistake, right? A costly mistake potentially.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're talking about like when families decide to hire a caregiver privately because to save some resources. What are some of those things that they should be wary of?
Insurance. That's something that people never think enough about when they think about getting care. Obviously, one of the analogies or something similar that I always mention when I talk to clients, or even our owners who are having these conversations with clients, you buy a car, you drive your car around. Most responsible people would never drive their car without car insurance, right? They're just like, why would I do that? That's just irresponsible. But when it comes to hiring a caregiver and providing, getting care and all those things, not even a thought about it. When, I've seen people drive. I think you're a great driver, but I've seen certain people drive in our office, and I'd be nervous to get in that car with them. But more often than not, people know how to drive, and they follow the rules and all those things. So that's not really that much of a concern. Way more things can go wrong in home care, and it's very simple. And it could be that everyone meant well, but things still happen. For instance, a somewhat a common sort of thing that could happen in the home care space is while assisting with bathing. Let's say a caregiver, runs a bath, right, and makes the water too hot, right? And for whatever reason, they didn't think to check how hot the water was before transferring the client into the water, and the client is burnt, and it's like it's such a sad and bad thing, and the caregiver feels bad, but that harm has happened. How do we address it with medical care, right? Who's going to pay for that care? All those things. All of a sudden, that's now in the forefront. But like, okay, well. The client's family may be like, hey, caregiver, we love you, but you're the one who did this, so we're going to expect you to handle this, right? But the caregiver may not have the financial ability to resolve this unfortunate situation. So now everyone just kind of left in limbo, being like, hey, something bad has happened and this needs to be taken care of and it's going to be costly, but no one's able to pay for it. And it's going to fall on the client, right? So now the client's now paying out of pocket, who knows how much to treat this, to treat this injury. Similarly, say a caregiver is assisting the client, out of a wheelchair into their bed, out of the wheelchair into the car, vice versa, whatever, and they pull their back, right? And in that scenario, the caregiver, not trying to cause trouble, but they literally, this is their livelihood. There's nothing more they can do. They can't work, right? So what's going to happen? The caregiver at that time, the private caregiver is left with no other option other than to sue the client, right? For medical expenses and things like that, right? And here's the twist, Ethan, that I would say that a lot of families don't think about when they enter into these sorts of arrangements with private caregivers. If there even is an agreement, a service agreement of some kind or some sort of contract with this individual caregiver, they're more likely than not signing it under their personal name. And why does that matter? In the example with the caregiver having to sue the client, they're going to sue them, and all the client's personal assets are now at risk for collections. If there's a collections issue, if damages are found and a certain amount of money is owed to the caregiver for whatever, how are they going to pay for that? Where are they pulling this money from? It's from whatever assets the client has under their name because they signed it personally, right? So
and this is a real situation that you're talking about. So family members believing that they're saving, let's say, $4 or $5 an hour by going private. The exposure that they're opening themselves up to from injuries, something get broken and stolen in the home, or even the caregiver themselves hurting their back, lifting up mom and saying, I can no longer work, is real and happens every day all across America. And these are things at Preferred Care at Home, I think it's important for us to talk about. These caregivers are our employees. We employ them. They're a 1099. We have workers' comp on them. We employ them. They're not 1099. We have workers' comp on them. And we have insurance for the home, which safeguards our clients in all these different areas. So yes, it costs more because those things cost money. We have employment costs, FICA, SUTA, FUTA. We have insurance costs, but those costs shield our clients ultimately to help them save money in the long run and give them peace of mind. So I think this is a good actually segue. In our industry, yes, we have private caregivers. I think that's without being said, but actually our industry is known for having options of contract labor. So agencies similar to Preferred Care at Home contracting out caregivers to perform duties that we believe these are employees. Why is that the case? Why do we believe that these are employees? And just walk me through why that's important to be able to differentiate and for individuals to understand. Yeah.
So, these agencies oftentimes are called registries. The reason why they do that is quite simple. They spend far less on their personnel because they're treating them as independent contractors. So when you treat like a worker as an independent contractor as opposed to an employee, a bunch of laws that only apply to employer-employees, such as overtime, minimum wage, payroll taxes, workers' comp requirements, all these things fly out the window, meaning they don't apply to the registry, right? So the registry is then able to quote the clients, their potential clients, existing clients, whatever, a rate far lower than like what an agency that employs their workers would be able to quote, right? And so on a just a price level, and that's the only real angle a registry has against an agency. Like, oh, you're paying so much, why would you pay when you can just do this? And you're getting caregivers are caregivers. They oftentimes, fail intentionally, unintentionally to mention the lack of a safety net, the fact that if there is an issue and this gets taken scrutinized by like a U.S. agency like a Department of Labor or an IRS or something like that, they're going to potentially bring the client in as the employer, right? In that scenario. So these registries are in a way putting their clients in a place that the clients aren't even aware of, right? That could potentially happen. So Huge difference there.
Not even indirectly. I mean, registries don't have workers' compensation, so that same horror story of the caregiver getting hurt on the job, the families there. In a registry model, you can't tell a caregiver when to come to work, what to do while they're there, how to clock in, how to clock out, because that's you tell employees to do that. You don't tell contractors to do that. The model just doesn't work for our space, but it hasn't stopped individuals from still operating in that function to save a couple dollars. Because that's ultimately what they're saving, a couple dollars. Their price points are probably similar to us, so they're just making a little bit more on top. But the liability they open up the client to, I think, is important for everyone to understand, and even our providers to be able to educate families on as well. Okay. We've talked a lot about this industry and home care and some of the ins and outs and payer sources. We fall under that non-medical home care, right? So when we say, Medicare, skilled, that's considered medical. And you say private, some of the things to say is, what are you? Oh, I'm non-medical home care agency. Where is that line? What is the line between medical and non-medical? So what type of services can we go up to? I think one really good example is I said a service called medication reminders. So let's talk about medications, because I think that's a really good place of a red line of description of what we can do and what we can't do. And maybe if you have some other things that come to mind, you could share as well.
Yeah. So it's the level of involvement, the amount of supervisory requirements. This all plays a part. So in the non-medical space, they don't expect you to be able to differentiate between two different types of medications and things like that. They don't expect you to do it. We're not trained to do that. And we'll make it clear right from the get-go. Be like, hey, this is not the sort of services we can provide. What we can provide is medication reminders. And depending on if you're in a licensed state, and the regulations oftentimes are very clear on like what is allowed and what isn't allowed. But some states allow you to open up the container, take the pills out, put it there, and then, telling them, hey, or assisting them with the self-administration of the medication. There's still training involved in that, but that training doesn't, go to the point of like requiring someone who is learned and understanding, the different medications and things like that. So there is that distinction. But I will say this: we do have locations that do provide those services. And we require our owners to make it clear from the beginning what they can and can't provide under their license, if there's a license.
It's good. Yeah, one of the things that comes to my mind as a operator would be I partner with a local pharmacy, and whenever I would sign up a client, I would let them know our care team has a process in which we are comfortable with medication reminders, which we can listen. We're not managing dosage. We're not the ones putting it into the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, because that's managing the dosage, right? So I would partner with a local pharmacist, and we would do bubble packs, right? Monthly bubble packs. Here are their medications, and it would be morning and evening, and all those pills, the morning ones would be all here, the evening ones would be here, and all our caregivers would have to do is make sure that those morning pills are taken. We'd be able to track, make sure that nothing was been forgotten, because that's the biggest deal. So number one reason for hospital readmissions is medication mismanagement. It's a big deal, okay? And so what we'll do on the administrative part is we'll help manage it properly using the correct professional, like a pharmacist, and then what's probably the most important connected piece, like nothing matters if it's being managed. What does it matter if it's being managed but not being reminded? It's just going to sit there. Then we'll do the part of making sure that managed medication is being properly taken at the right time with our reminders. So that's kind of the red line there is, hey, medication, that's medical. But what we'll do is when that medication's there, we'll come in there and we'll make sure it's being taken. Another good example is like physical therapy and occupational therapy at the home. That therapist is in there for 1 hour, 3 times a week. Do you know what's the most important part of rehabilitation? Is the homework side of things. The getting up and getting out, the range of motion. So no, we're not the ones giving the orders of how to properly rehab, but we are the ones in the home making sure that homework is being followed through on. So that's another really good red line item there as well. Okay. So one more question for you here, Ashly. let's talk about an incident that occurs in the home, because here's the thing is we're problem solvers when we step into the home. We're dealing with individuals who are aging. Things happen. So what happens when an incident occurs like a slip or a fall, or even an item is missing? What does the legal do for an owner in the first 24 hours to ensure transparency?
Yeah, as soon as we're made aware of something like this, we issue, we go out there, obviously. We go there and we try to figure out what happened. We take incident reports from everyone involved, families, caregivers, whoever else may be involved, to make sure we document what is being said in the moment, because those things can change. But once we understand what's happening and, the real, scope of like the issue, we may then bring in our insurance almost immediately, right? And then talk with them and make sure everything is being covered on that end, so that if something needs to be made whole, we can do that. We work with the authorities. We bring in the authorities themselves because we're considered a mandated reporter. So we will manage the situation, make sure that all the anxiety and the issues and the worries are handled by us in a way that's professional and efficient, and with a resolution in sight.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think a really good way to say this, Frank says this all the time, when problems arise, this is where we make our money, in the sense of this is why families employ us for their loved ones. This is why we're in business. We're prepared for these type of situations. That's why we have the workers' comp in case a caregiver gets hurt. That's why we have the insurance with our vendors in case something gets broken or stolen in the home. And that's the process over 40 years that we have to be able to handle situations like this. Like you said, Ashly, which I think is really important, the anxiety level drops for family members and the client, knowing that there's an agency that is not only prepared, but also equipped to be able to handle a situation like this. So the first 24 hours, they're huge. The way that we have our system set up is to be able to handle situations just like this. Okay. Ashly, I'm going to hit some fire questions for you to end this, some do's and don'ts on kind of some of the topics that we talked about through this podcast. So I'm just going to say a word, like a keyword, and then you're going to say a do for that keyword and a don't for that keyword. How does that sound?
Yeah. Okay, let's do it.
All right. So let's talk about what does it do for hiring? Hiring a caregiver. Let's talk about a family looking to hire a caregiver or hire an agency. What does it do for them?
Yeah. One of the first things you want to do is verify that they have workers' comp and professional and general liability insurance.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of goes back to what we talked about, is you do not want to open yourself up to that and make sure that they don't have that. With preferred care at home, you never have to worry about that. What's a don't? I'm assuming I know the answer to that one.
Yeah. Don't just assume that your standard homeowner's insurance will cover things. It may cover like a small, part of it, but it's not going to feel satisfying in any way.
Okay, let's talk about, again, same kind of vision, the personnel looking for care. What is payment?
Yeah.
What does it do for payment?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you want to know what you're expected to do. So obviously a client service agreement of some kind that outlines all the costs and things like that. Nothing's hidden. Oftentimes with regulated states, that's a requirement no matter what.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, what we see in our industry, probably, I don't know exactly what you're going to say, but what is a don't?
Yeah, paying under the table, trying to be sneaky about it, because all it takes is for the caregiver to get disgruntled or someone else to find out about it and file something, and then now you're pulled into all kinds of scrutiny and potential things that you owe to the state or to the caregiver and all these things. Yeah.
Something that happens that we didn't really touch on, and I think it's important for me to set up for this next one, is advanced directives and power of attorneys. So as we age, I think it's really important that we set our families up for success, and that's something that we do at Preferred Care at Home. We have partners in all of our local communities, like elder law attorneys, that if this is the first time entering into the world of care, we make sure that the necessary initiatives and credentials are given to family members who are the ones making the choice for their loved ones if that's necessary. So with that being said, I think Let's talk about care plans. What is a good do for a care plan that we recommend?
We recommend, so speaking as, like someone who gives guidance to our owners, one of the first things we say when, developing this and getting involved in, finding out what is actually needed or not, is understanding who is even allowed to be involved in the process and sanction, services or whatever, right? So what we're talking about, as you alluded to with the power of attorney, is finding out whether there is one in place. And if there is one in place, to see if it's active. And if it is active, what's the scope of it, right? Because not all power of attorneys are the same. The scope of it could be different. It could be very limited. It could be very broad. But we teach our owners to have that dialogue, have that conversation, get the document, review the document. Because oftentimes, clients may not even, they may just say like, yeah, there's a power of attorney, but may not even fully understand what is in it. So we help them, we educate. That's a big part of what we try to do.
Fantastic. And a don't. What is it?
Don't start. Process? Just being reckless, not making. So working with agencies or private caregivers who are just rushing through without accounting for all these things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think this is a really good place to end on operations, talking about everything that we've talked about when it comes to privately or contract labor agency or an employee agency. So we have a family who says, okay, it's between you and somebody else, but their rates are a little less, but they 1099 their caregivers. What do you think are the do and don'ts when it comes to operations of a home care agency? What is, in your opinion, the number one do?
Look for agencies that employ. As opposed to contract, because the responsibilities, the obligations, the skin in the game is different, right? Agencies have skin in the game. They're responsible for their employees. They can't just be like contractor and they just leave, right? If something goes wrong. The shared responsibility, the obligation, that's what you are wanting and that's what you're paying for. And that's what you would get with an employee agency as opposed to a contractor agency.
Like preferred care at home locations. Mm-hmm. What is a don't?
Yeah, don't use contractors. It's just not. It just doesn't really make sense in our day. So
yeah. Well, Ashly, I want to thank you for your time today on the Inside Voice. I think getting the opportunity just to connect with you about these topics are extremely important for a lot of individuals in the world of seeking home care. This is just great. This information is just such a great area. Even potentially for owner-operators, they can find themselves not fully understanding some of these things. And if you are a part of the preferred care at home family, reach out to us, make sure you're clear on all these topics that we discussed today. And again, listen, I think Ashly would like me to share this with everybody. He's a diehard Vols fan, so I just really appreciate his willingness to stick it out for a team like Tennessee. And Ashly, thank you for your time. Thanks for listening. Make sure you give us a follow so you stay up to date whenever we drop a new episode. Inside Voice.